Philosophically, chapter 1 is the prophet wondering and worrying. Chapter 2, the prophet waiting. And chapter 3, the prophet worshiping and witnessing. You could also outline the book geographically. Chapter 1, he begins in the valley. Chapter 2, he climbs up into the watchtower to wait on the Lord. And chapter 3, at least through his language, he ascends up into the mountains. You could also outline the book spiritually. He begins in turmoil in chapter 1, or trial. He moves into trust in chapter 2 and triumph in chapter 3. So from gloom to glory, the book swiftly moves in that direction. Habakkuk has been called the grandfather of the Reformation, because it was this text that Martin Luther meditated on, and it changed his whole outlook in his dealing with God. The just shall live by their faith. There's also an interesting story about this book in Benjamin Franklin. It seems that Benjamin Franklin visited Paris and was speaking to a group of erudite philosophers, a literary club, and they were comparing different fine literature. There was also a group that denied the existence of God and denied the inspiration of the Bible. So Benjamin Franklin read to them that last section, which we'll read tonight in chapter 3. And it so stunned his audience, it won their admiration. And they said, "Where did you get that wonderful piece of literature? Who wrote that? Where does it come from? How can we get copies?" And he was delighted to tell them it comes from the pages of Scripture, the prophet Habakkuk, as given by the Lord. So Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 1, the burden, or you might translate it, the oracle, or the judgment, which the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry, and you will not hear? Even cry out to you violence, and you will not save. Lord, I've been praying a long time, and you have been silent. You're not answering my prayers. How long do I have to keep this up? Verse 3, why do you show me iniquity and cause me to see trouble? For plundering and violence are before me, and there is strife and contention arises. Remember back in history when King Josiah took the throne, he was an 8-year-old kid. By the time Josiah turned 16, already his heart was moved toward the things of the Spirit, toward the things of God. And at age 16, he initiated some pretty wonderful spiritual reforms in Jerusalem. He purged the land of idolatry. He broke down the high places and the altars to Baal and Ashtoreth. He rebuilt the temple and reinaugurated worship services within the temple. The book of the law was found and it was read, and a wonderful, bright spot in a dark history developed under Josiah. But King Josiah died, as we mentioned, in a battle at the valley of Megiddo. And after Josiah, a series of kings sat upon the throne, some of them in rapid succession. Jehoahaz, his son, was on the throne for only 3 months. He barely got it warm. And then he was deposed by the Pharaoh in Egypt. After him, Jehoiakim sat upon the throne, and he occupied it for about 11 years, an 11-year reign. And during that reign, oppression, injustice, violence, and bloodshed was the game of the day under his reign. After him, Jehoiachin sat upon the throne. He was there for 3 months and 10 days. He was deposed by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and finally Zedekiah, for a short period of time, was placed upon the throne. But here's the setting. Here's the prophet in the midst of Judah and in the midst of Jerusalem. These are God's covenant people. But he looks around and he sees violence, injustice, oppression. He scratches his head and he cries out to God, Lord, why don't you do something? How long are you going to let this go on? How long will you let the unjust rule and the righteous suffer? while it seems the ungodly people are...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.